Let's get peppy. Welcome to Pepisode 71, a very special Pepisode, this one. We've got Dr. Jennifer Hunt, who is directly off the show. We literally just finished filming the show. It's 1:30 in the afternoon. She's got to get out just after 2:30, so I'm going to keep on doing time calls. I know that means it's only going to be about an hour, and you guys like it a lot longer than that, but it's better than nothing, which is what you got if she wasn't going to be generous enough with her time. So thank you very much for that. Because we've just come off the show, we're both the most well-coiffed podcast hosts of all time at the moment. Tell us about yourself, by the way, Dr. Jen, for those who don't know who you are.
Sure. So my name is Dr. Jennifer Hunt. I'm a lecturer in security studies at Macquarie University and an associate at the U.S. Studies Center.
Excellent. Do you fraternise with Dr. David Smith?
I do.
Do you have any gossip about Dr. David Smith?
Not that I can share on air.
They never do. It's like an omerta. Anyway. Okay, now, by the way, the people who watch this or listen to this often don't watch the show. It's something that's quite amusing, just how few people who are into the podcast have any time for our TV show. That's right. So if you made just a hell of a point, feel free to make it again for the VIPeps who are listening.
I shall.
Now. Okay. Now, I'm not going to do questions today for obvious reasons because we're running out of time before we even begin. But I am looking at the questions. I'm writing them down like Friendly Geordie someone asked about. I will talk about that in a future ep. So if you guys have some questions, just put in the on the comments for YouTube or Facebook. Let's get straight into it. I'm going to have just on a little housekeeping thing, something we talked about a couple of weeks ago. I saw an interesting study, which I'll tell you about, an article, which I'll put in the homework. It was about negative polarisation. We talked about that a couple of weeks back. It was a piece by Lee Drutman in 538, which I found really interesting. He added in, now something we've heard a lot about is that about negative polarisation, which is when people hate the other party more than they like their own party, and that's certainly the case in America and in Australia for that matter. Now in America, they do hate the other party more than in comparable other countries. The guy has the graphs in the article, which you can find in the homework of either in the blurb of the Facebook or the YouTube videos. But this is something I haven't seen before. They're also in America more distant from their own party. It's not just that they hate the other party more, they like their own party less. And the reason why that's important is because it means that the only way their party can get them to vote when it's not compulsory is by driving up the hate of the other party. There's no point them, and this rings true when you think about it, there's no point Democrats and Republicans trying to appeal to Democrats and Republicans because they don't like their own, inverted commas, establishment. They just hate the other party so much more. So which gives him every incentive to be as negative as possible, which creates more negative polarisation. I've never seen that point before about their feelings to their own party. But anyway, it's in the articles. Have a look.
I think there's still a measure of asymmetric polarization between the two parties from Norm Ornstein. I think that would hold true more for the Republican Party than the Democratic Party. For instance, you saw Trump monetize this on his store, right? So I'm writing a piece called The Merchant of Menace, where he basically takes these negative messages, puts them on a T-shirt, and sells it. There was a onesie that he was selling that said, "I cry less than Democrats." He sold shirts directly targeting key Democratic members. This is very different, right? Essentially, if you're cheering for your own team and you go to the store, you expect to see merchandise about "Go my team." But I think you're right, the negative partisanship is being pushed and monetized.
It feels like, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, you're talking data here, so I'm not surprised. But I feel like the Democrats are behind the Republicans when it comes to hating the other side, but not by a huge amount. And they're always like 10 years behind. I
think you can tell by the lack of policy platform on the Republican side that is their only strategy, the negative partisanship. Remember in 2020, they didn't even bother to update their platform.
That point should be made over and over and over again. I still can't believe that they literally, you might not realize this, listeners, but they literally reran the 2016 platform in 2020. And they didn't even change it to take into account that Trump was now president. They hated all over the president in the 2016 platform, and they kept that in the 2020 platform because they kept it word for word.
Yes.
Incredible. We probably shouldn't spend too much time on foreign affairs because there's so much that we want to talk about. But I mean, the big news of this week was the G7 and the Putin and so forth, the Putin summits, the Summit Fest. Do you have anything to add that you think is worth noting about Summit Fest this week?
I would just say I think the tone is very different between the previous administration and the Biden administration. You got the sense when Trump and Biden were side by side, but that it wasn't a relationship of equals. In fact, Trump was quite obsequious when it came to Putin. He sided with Putin over his own intelligence community. He took the word of Putin. He didn't allow other officials in the room when he was talking to Putin. So I think you see the power dynamics are very different when we talk about the difference between these summits versus the previous administration.
Sure. Something which seemed a little bit more similar to me between this and the previous administration was Biden he got a little bit cranky. He hadn't had his nap in the afternoon. And there was a bit where he was snapping. I'll play the clip. You've seen it, but just for the viewers.
Why are you so confident he'll change his behavior, Mr. President?
Yeah, I'm not confident he'll change behavior. What do you do all the time?
So
when did I say I was confident?
You said in the next 6 months you'll be able to determine.
What I said was, let's get it straight. I said what will change their behavior is if the rest of the world reacts to them and it diminishes their standing in the world. I'm not confident of anything. I'm just stating the fact.
But given his past behavior has not changed, and in that press conference after sitting down with you for several hours, he denied any involvement in cyber attacks. He downplayed human rights abuses. He even refused to say Alexei Navalny's name. So how does that account to a constructive meeting as President Putin?
If you don't understand that, you're in the wrong business.
If you don't understand that, you're in the wrong business was probably the narkiest thing he said in that particular exchange. I don't have a problem with people, there's a lot of people playing clips of Trump shooting down journalists and go, oh, look at that. I don't have a problem with a president having a temper, being a human being, especially after a long trip, whatever. It wasn't the smartest question either, to be honest. But I mean, it's his job to deal with questions that aren't the smartest questions. Yeah, I'm not excusing it. but yeah, he got pretty snappy. But the thing which, it wasn't that I actually want to draw attention to, it's the second part, because the reporters came back to him a little bit later on. And this is what he then said.
Look, to be a good reporter, you got to be negative. You got to have a negative view of life, okay? It seems to me, the way you never ask a positive question. Why, in fact, having agreement, we'll find out. We have an agreement to work on a major arms control agreement. I started working on arms control agreements back all the way during the Cold War. If we could do one in the Cold War, why couldn't we do one now? We'll see. We will see whether or not it happens. But the thing that always amazed me about the questions, and I apologize for having been short on this before. If you were in my position, would you say, well, I don't think, man, anything's going to happen. It's going to be really rough. I think it's going to really be bad. You guarantee nothing happens. You guarantee nothing happens.
Okay, now I play that long because I get sick of clips out of context. And the point he's making, I think, is a fair point. Of course he's not going to come out and go, well, it was all shit. That is fine. But the thing that reminded me a little bit of Trump, there was a few things there, actually. The first of which was he was holding a press conference in front of a roaring plane. I definitely had some flashbacks there.
Unrecommended, yeah.
Secondly, the leap into everyone's so negative all the time. Everyone's so negative. And then it's particularly ridiculous with Biden. Now, Trump, to be fair, there was a lot of negativity towards Trump, even though he shouldn't have been whinging about it constantly. But Biden, he's got, according to Pew, his first 60 days had 19% negative stories, which is the smallest share in 30 years. So you can't really complain. So it's not like they've been mean and negative to him all the time. And so I just wonder. He just seems to me quite sensitive in these press conferences. He doesn't hold a lot of them, and he hasn't had this kind of biting the head off people incident before. But he gets a bit stroppy. What are your thoughts?
I think he was niggled to be misquoted, and fair enough. We all hate to be misquoted, so that really started it down this path. But perhaps it's the reach of some of the positive stories versus the negative. If you are listening to Fox News and that sort of information ecosystem, of course it's not penetrating through. Is it the fault of this journalist? Absolutely not.
Yeah. By the way, if you don't understand that you're in the wrong business, reminded me a little bit of if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. There's just a little bit of there's more of an echo there. I just he likes that sort of formulation. The thing I also found interesting about this was the first time that the press started to turn against Biden in any way, shape or form. Olivia Nuzzi, who's generally a bit of a Biden fangirl, she came out with, if you're the most powerful person in the world and you can't field questions from the media without losing your temper, maybe you're in the wrong business. What kind of example does it set for other countries when the President of the United States insults a member of the free press on the international stage for asking a fair question in good faith? And this is the one I found really interesting from CNN.
But we have seen President Biden do that frequently. What we've not seen him do is answer questions like that without his aides screaming at him to stop. I have never seen a president, covering the last 4 of them, who is so protected by his aides in terms of often not wanting him to answer some questions.
What do we reckon?
I hadn't seen that clip before. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was certainly surprised. I mean, it does bring echoes of the Cotton Wool campaign, of him taking the lead at midday every second day and so forth, which annoyed me so much. When that was happening, I was like going, yes, I know you can get away with it. Sure, it might be clever campaigning, but I feel like presidential candidates have a moral necessity to put themselves out there so people know who they are voting for, even if they can get away with it.
That's true, but Biden has a pretty long record to see who this individual is and how he would be as president.
That is very true. Anyway, all right, let's. Oh, actually, I got one question for you, and that is there any point to NATO anymore?
Oh gosh.
Because just watching it, just going, half these countries now used to be part of the Soviet Union. I can see why Russia is pissed off by this. Like when Gorbachev hastened the demise of the Soviet Union, that was, if I recall, that was part of the deal, and now NATO's going to go away as well. But NATO just snapped up all these previous satellite countries to be right on Russia's doorstep, even when it was supposed to be all over. And now they're talking about Ukraine, which I'm sure Russia really wouldn't like. And it's not like I'm on Russia's side, but I do think to myself, I'm not sure what it's achieving. Russia isn't the problem anymore. I'm not sure what it's achieving to be constantly poking them by snapping up every country that's right next to Russia. I mean,
But to these countries, Russia is the problem.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. But also, is America going to go to war if Russia takes over Montenegro? I don't think it's going to.
Well, Trump said they weren't.
Yeah, that's right. I feel like it's unrealistic as well.
I think it's more about confronting challenges collectively. So some of the things that NATO works on are the evolution of cyber law, for instance, at the Cyber Center of Excellence in Tallinn, Estonia. One of the first cyber attacks in the world, of course, orchestrated by Russia. So I think they do still work together as a group. They've got a lot of military heft and a lot of history of collaboration that can be utilized to move forward on different issues.
Okay. I just want to talk about Ukraine very quickly. Oh, geez, I'm sorry, I'm just rushing around. I'm just conscious of trying to cram what I can. When we're talking about this kind of stuff, I mentioned Ukraine and NATO, and it's kind of, I was cheating a bit when I talked about Ukraine. Now Ukraine's maybe going to be in NATO because they're not going to be in NATO, not anytime soon. It's like a very, very lengthy process. It was back in 2008, they were offered to join NATO if they went through this extremely lengthy process, and 13 years later they've done basically nothing. So they're not going to be in NATO tomorrow. But I do want to talk about Ukraine slightly with NATO because I feel like they've been screwed in a big way recently, and it's been ignored. Back a year ago, we all really cared about Ukraine, little Ukraine fighting against Russia, and now no one gives a shit. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I'm sure you know, but people are listening. Okay, there's this pipeline called Nord Stream 2, which there is already a pipeline from the Russian. The entire Russian economy runs on gas, essentially, fossil fuels. And there's already a pipeline from Russia to Europe. Does it go to Germany, the one underneath Ukraine? Okay, so there's already a pipeline from Russia to Germany that goes directly under Ukraine. And that is the main reason why Russia has to respect Ukraine, because they have control over Russia's entire economy. Now, Russia intelligently built a second pipeline, so they didn't have to deal with that. And this second pipeline does not go through Ukraine. It's called Nord Stream 2, and there have been sanctions on it for all kinds of reasons. The left don't like having this massive gas pipeline, which is going to be responsible for endless carbon emissions over the next few decades. The right don't like the idea of Germany being so dependent on Russia for power. And Ukraine doesn't like them being passed over by that pipeline. So they had these sanctions, but Russia kept on building it anyway. We got to the point where it was like 95% built when Biden took over. And he was forced to make a decision, and we're going to stay with these sanctions, even though it's not stopping them building it. And that what the decision they had to make then was, are we going to stop putting sanctions on Russia and start putting sanctions on Germany for receiving the gas through this pipeline? Because it's not going to get finished if Germany isn't going to take anything. And that's the way you really put an end to it. And Biden made the decision. Anthony Blinken said, yeah, let's do that. At least that's what leaks say. He said, yeah, let's do that. Let's go, let's put the sanctions on Germany. And Biden said, no, we're not going to sacrifice the relationship of Germany for this pipeline. Okay, so that's the background. Now, Ukraine, Zelensky, remember Zelensky? We all love Zelensky. He's a comedian. Everyone loves Zelensky. What a nice guy. He is spitting fire. Let me read some quotes. So this is first to him explaining the situation. We already have a pipeline of our own. As long as this pipeline's functioning, Russia is obliged to talk to Ukraine. It's obliged to talk to Europe at the same table. If they build the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, circumvent Ukraine, it's clear that a time will come when Ukraine will no longer have this leverage. Everybody is fully aware of this. We will not be of use. Then he says, we understand this is a weapon, a real weapon, and I speak openly about it, a weapon in the hands of the Russian Federation. And it's not very understandable, I feel, and definitely not expected, that the bullets to this weapon can possibly be provided by such a great country as the United States, because it's an exemplary civilization, an exemplary democracy in the world. Okay, then, to be honest, we were very surprised that America behaved this way. I truly thought that when it came to Nord Stream 2, the United States remained the last standing outpost. We understand that only the United States is capable of stopping this construction. We had this first conversation with President Biden. It was a phone conversation. I received all the signals. They were direct signals. I was very happy about it. I've always had, I know we've always had bipartisan support in the United States, but I've always said, indeed, all the experts and diplomats have the same understanding. Biden knows Ukraine better than any other previous former president, and therefore he understands all the issues and what's most important, all the security risks. That's why, again, we were very unpleasantly surprised. The feeling of anger, it's over now. I feel this is a different feeling. It's a feeling of disappointment.
Oh, that's worse.
Yeah, so that's where he's at. Now, to make up for it, Joe Biden invites Zelensky to the White House in July, I think, after he's met Putin. And he now starts talking about potentially them joining NATO, which is not going to happen. How screwed are Ukraine?
Oh, well, that started last year, as you mentioned. Of course, with Trump, sort of abusing his power to threaten to withhold military aid from Ukraine unless they manufactured some dirt on what he thought would be opponent, Biden. So I think, gosh, Ukraine has gotten a pretty rough deal over the last year. But I think in line with the NATO summit, the G7, Biden is not willing to squander what little trust there is remaining between America and its allies. And perhaps this was just a bridge too far.
Okay. Let's, I'm going to skip past a bit of my Department of Justice stuff. I want to get to the stuff that you're bringing to the table because I'm here all the time. You're the special guest.
When are we going to talk about your shirt?
Let's talk about it right now. This is a Herman Cain shirt. This is an official Herman Cain shirt, this one, R.I.P. Herman Cain, who died of coronavirus. Well, look, we don't know that he caught it from the Trump rally.
The timeline fits.
It just seems like he might have caught it from the Trump rally.
Right.
He could have caught it from the vendor outside the Trump rally for all we know.
He could have, but the important point being that he caught it after he poo-pooed all mitigation efforts to avoid it.
That is true.
Large gatherings, refused to wear masks.
Yeah.
Cautionary tale, perhaps.
Yes, and he's got a bit of an ink blot plan T-shirt, which I like very much.
How long have you had this shirt?
Well, 2012.
So this is an authentic vintage.
I don't know if it was authentic, but it was from the internet. You can't buy directly in Australia American shirts. But you buy people who rip off American shirts.
Oh, of course. Well, that works too.
So I do have a general policy with my shirts of making sure that the design is a design that was in circulation. Like some people have noticed that I wear shirts from the 20s and T-shirts weren't invented in the 20s, but the designs are from buttons that were used in the 20s. So I do that because John has a cow if it's not historically. So they can thank him. Now we've talked about that. I'm going to skip past a little bit on the Department of Justice stuff, but I know you want to talk about the Department of Justice terror, their new terror plan. So do you want to talk about that?
Well, just sort of as an update, as you might recall, on January 6th, there was an insurrection. And the flow on from that, I think, is going to consume the United States for the foreseeable future, whether there's accountability, whether there's transparency, who was involved. And there's been a signal that domestic extremism is going to be taken more seriously under the Biden administration rather than comparatively under the Trump administration. And I think
I've got the clip. Sorry.
Let's roll.
I've got a clip of Merrick Garland telling you exactly how much he's going to take this seriously.
In the FBI's view, the top domestic violent extremist threat comes from racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, specifically those who advocated for the superiority of the white race.
When he made Attorney General, he said, the reason I want to do this is because way back with Oklahoma, I was dealing with these white supremacists and I think we've got a problem. So they're taking it seriously. So yeah, go on.
Absolutely. And I think the new strand of that is on a couple of fronts. One of them is conspiracy-driven domestic extremism. So this was flagged by the FBI in 2019, specifically mentioning Pizzagate, and which became QAnon later, and mentioned election violence as well, which is exactly what we saw in January. Now that we're getting some actual charges laid and plea bargains, I think that's going to be very important for moving forward.
We might as well keep on going, talking about January 6th, now that we've started. Now we've sort of touched it slightly. There are a lot of theories, even now, going on about January 6th. There is, actually, I'll talk about polling just briefly before I talk about the theories, which is interesting. This is from Morning Consult. 82% of Republicans and 77% of Democrats believe America's democracy is currently under threat. 29% of Republicans believe it's very or somewhat likely Trump will be restored to the presidency still. That's always funny. This is an interesting one. According to Pew, 17% of people in 16 international countries, like the usual countries, Italy, Australia, all those countries, say American democracy is a good model to follow. 17%. A few years ago, it was 57%. So, which is interesting, just how everyone is down on American democracy now. And by the way, as a little aside, this is something I've said on this podcast a number of times, I'll just keep on saying it, that to me, when people talk about HR1 and all that kind of stuff, I think we've got a real problem, no doubt about that, although I don't think HR1 solves it. But when people hype up the tiniest little details when it comes to voting rights, when they go, oh no, they're changing early voting from 19 days to 17 days. This is Jim Crow. When they do that shit, I think they actually achieve a much bigger negative than the negative that they are trying to stop. Because you know what? The parties know what they're doing. They're going to get their voters out. If it's 17 days rather than 19 days, they'll get their voters out. Maybe a few will miss out. I'm not saying it's great. I'm not cheering on the eradication of open voting. But what I'm saying is the price you pay by constantly going on about this person's trying to destroy democracy, this person's trying to destroy democracy, is that no one has any faith in democracy. They just take it on board. Oh, it's all rigged. It's all rigged. Why bother? It's all rigged. And as soon as you have an election where literally no one trusts the outcome, then you're fucked.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter what the situation is with the rules. You're screwed because democracy does not function unless people accept that they lost.
Yeah, and it's not just the common citizenry. We had more than 100 representatives vote against certifying the election on the same ballots in which they themselves won office.
Yeah. So anyway, that kind of stuff I think is a real alarm bell. The 82% of Republicans, 77% of Democrats won.
And each of them would flag the other as the main threat to that democracy.
Of course, yeah. Now, as I was saying, there's a lot of theories out there about January 6th. Jonathan Last listed them all.
Oh, God.
It's pretty good. Number one, there was no insurrection. It was a peaceful protest.
Yes.
Number two, there was no insurrection. It was a mostly peaceful protest with a couple of well-meaning knuckleheads who were being prosecuted. Number three, there was an insurrection and it was a false flag perpetrated by violent Antifa thugs. 4, there was an insurrection and it was conducted by brave patriots who righteously occupied the people's house and were willing to die to stop the steal. Number 5, law enforcement officers on the scene didn't have any concerns. They opened the doors to Trump supporters and welcomed them. Number 6, law enforcement officers on the scene were violent thugs who martyred Ashley Babbitt. Okay, so they're the 6 major theories. But to add to that list, there's a new theory.
Yes.
From Tucker Carlson.
The FBI
Yes.
instigated this.
They're behind it. The FBI did it. Let's play a bit of a clip and then let's talk about this because it's a lot of fun. Here we go.
For example, one of those unindicted co-conspirators is someone government documents identify only as Person 2. According to those documents, Person 2 stayed in the same hotel room as a man called Thomas Caldwell, an insurrectionist, a man alleged to be a member of the group the Oath Keepers. Person 2 also, quote, stormed the barricades at the Capitol on January 6th alongside Thomas Caldwell. The government's indictments further indicate that Caldwell, who, by the way, is a 65-year-old man, is dangerous insurrectionist, was led to believe there would be a, quote, quick reaction force also participating on January 6th. That quick reaction force, Caldwell was told, would be led by someone called Person 3, who had a hotel room and an accomplice with him. But wait, here's the interesting thing. Person 2 and Person 3 were organizers of the riot. The government knows who they are, but the government has not charged them. Why is that? You know why. They were almost certainly working for the FBI. So FBI operatives were organizing the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, according to government documents.
What do you reckon, Jen?
Oh, a few things stand out. I love the insinuation that no one over a certain age could be a violent insurrectionist.
Yes.
What an ageist. Thinking about, the largest mass shooting in the United States with more than 50 people killed and 800 injured was instituted by someone exactly in that cohort, the Las Vegas shooting. Cool. So I reject the premise of his first statement. But the fact that, Tucker Carlson is introducing yet another conspiracy theory just points to how serious this event is and how confused the Republican Party is about how to respond to it.
That's true, because if he's right, they should have a commission, shouldn't they?
Perhaps an investigation.
Yes, to get to the bottom of the FBI.
If they're going to get to the deep state, how will they without an investigation?
Now, we should say, by the way, for those who may not realise why that was just pure febrile stupidity, that the FBI can't be an unindicted co-conspirator. By definition, legally, you cannot be a conspirator if you're an agent who's pretending to be a conspirator. It's not like, he was saying conspiratorial things, so he's a co-conspirator. It doesn't work like that. Legally, you're either a conspirator or you're an agent. You can't be both, okay? So you go, okay, well, hang on. Who was Person 2 then, if it wasn't the FBI? Well, okay, let me throw a few ideas at you. The first one is that there's a lot of reasons why someone might be an unindicted co-conspirator.
Individual one, perhaps?
Well, yeah, that's right. But also, maybe they flipped. That's a good reason not to indict someone.
State's witness.
I imagine a lot of these guys are flipping at the moment. So that's number one. Number two, if you look at the details which Tucker Carlson glossed over about Person 2, who was staying in the same hotel room as this guy, I mean, who do you reckon it is, Person 2? Person 2, if you look at the details, Person 2 was also taking selfies with this guy, and Person 2 was his wife. Person 2 was obviously his wife, not an FBI agent. She was just, I don't know if she flipped on him or they just decided not to prosecute her for whatever reason, but she's obviously his wife. So the whole thing is just so dumb. And Tucker Carlson knows that. We always say this. He's a smart guy. Like, maybe he's not as smart as he thinks he is, but he's smarter than these dead shits, I'll tell you that. He knows that's not true. So,
I don't know. The last segment I listened to Carlton in its totality was, I think it was July 2018, and he was talking about the tyranny of the metric system. So he'll push whatever he thinks his audience will buy.
Absolutely. So, what are your focuses on like this whole area? Like January 6th, conspiracy theories, the ongoing refusal to accept the election win even now. What do you want to focus on? I can go wherever you want.
Well, I think that conspiracy theories as this new form of domestic extremism is going to be, it is going to be a problem for future elections. We already see that same narrative being used to undermine voting rights in the United States. And some of the ways that this, election security narrative is going is quite blatant in who they think is a real American that should have the real franchise. So I think that's real disturbing.
Yeah, the real American stuff is definitely disturbing, and it is getting a bit actual. I saw a stat. In fact, I know you saw a stat because we talked about this on the phone. So we do talk beforehand. It was from the Benenson Strategy Group. They conducted a survey that 17% of local election officials in the United States have faced threats because of their job. 17%. By the way, their job is a shitty job. Like it's often volunteer.
Absolutely.
And even if it's not volunteer, it's not paid very much.
No.
And it's terrible conditions. And 17% have faced threats. 32% have felt unsafe because of their job as a local election official. Now, let me tell you what's going to happen. What's going to happen is they're going to drop out. And they're going to get replaced by crazies because they're the only people who aren't under threat.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. That's a problem not only because those crazies are going to conduct an election poorly, which then goes to what I was saying before about no one can trust in an election. But on top of that, they're not even capable of, they're idiots. They're not capable of conducting it properly. Leaving aside bias, they're just going to screw it up. I mean, look at this Arizona audit. Like, they're trying their best. They're just morons.
First, they were looking for bamboo threads to see if China was involved. Now they've decamped the whole operation to a cabin in Montana.
Yes.
They've crossed state lines now.
I didn't even know about the Montana bit. They're going to be coming back soon, in the next few weeks. They're due to come back in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and they're obviously going to declare that Trump won, obviously. And it's going to be ugly because there's Pennsylvania's watching what they're doing.
Yep.
Georgia's watching what they're doing. They're going to try and replicate it. By the way, you talked about the bamboo. I've been meaning to play this for weeks. I get told off by people when I play music underneath our podcast. I'm going to try and put it really soft, but then at the end of this podcast, I'll play you the whole song. I'll play it underneath our title so you can enjoy. The guy who came up with the bamboo theory is a guy called Jovian Pulitzer. His name's Pulitzer. It's just beautiful. Anyway, Jovian Pulitzer, he's a real hero. He's a real folk hero for these guys, right? Someone's made a song called Warrior in his honour. It is so funny. And I'm going to play, it's like a Sarah McLachlan number. I'm going to play it you're going to hear it now, but very softly so it piss people off. But if you want to hear it properly, hear the words, which are delicious. You just fast forward to the end of the podcast or just wait till the end and it'll send you to sleep if you're listening in bed. But man, it's funny.
But that's an excellent point you bring up. When we talk about some of these election laws that are going in, it's not about just disenfranchising people. It's taking political control over the electoral process. Yeah. So now those court cases that Trump lost won't even get to the court because now it is the Republican legislature that gets to be the decider of an election. Even without credible allegations of fraud, they can now toss elections that they disagree with. That is the premise of some of these pieces of legislation.
But even worse, like if they're following things like this Arizona audit, they create fraud through their anti-fraud mechanisms. Like this Arizona audit, if like they always go, why are you worried about this audit? If you got something to hide, if you don't have something to hide, then why not count again? If they were just counting, that would be fine. But they're not just counting.
No.
Like they've the procedure they got here. Hang on, I'll just find it quickly. They got they have the process they're going for is. They're looking for more than acceptable variance, is the phrase they say, from the official tally, okay? More than acceptable variance, they define as 0.3%, because that was Joe Biden's margin of victory in Arizona. Okay. The way they count, do you know the way they count? Have you heard this?
No.
They go through 100 ballots at a time, and if the 3 people go through 100 ballots at a time, they spin it on a lazy Susan, right, which is obviously prone to mistakes. But anyway, they count the votes as they go past. If the three people differ by less than 2 votes, they go on. Do the maths. That's 2%. They're talking about 0.3% variance. There's a 2% error on every single count. It's just so dumb. And sorry, I don't want to go about these guys forever, but it just drives me crazy that the people who actually instituted this, the state senate that's behind this, were elected by the election that they're counting.
Yes.
It's just
that they're undermining.
I just can't believe it. Anyway.
And I think you're right. It's the election workers that are going to suffer. Trump mentioned a particular election worker in that call with the state secretary in Georgia, and that woman faced unimaginable abuse. He even mentioned her young daughter in this call to almost, support violence and intimidation of these people. My mother actually works at the elections and the local elections in North Carolina.
Has she been threatened?
She calls herself a poll worker.
Has she been threatened?
Not that I know of.
North Carolina's pretty hot.
It's a swing state, absolutely, but there is a Democratic governor, which keeps a bit of sanity in the process happening. But remember, North Carolina is a laboratory for some of these undemocratic power grabs. When the last governor refused to concede that election, I believe it was 2018. And then held emergency sessions to put through emergency powers to strip the incoming Democratic governor of powers. So I remember one study was talking about how on the indices of what constitutes a democracy, North Carolina no longer qualifies as a result of some of those actions.
Wow. By the way, there's a special one in Arizona, not quite as bad as North Carolina, but I have mentioned on the podcast before, but I'll mention it again because it just doesn't get nearly enough coverage, which is a similar kind of dodgy bill of law they passed. Do you know they've made it in Arizona that if someone challenges the 2022 election, the Secretary of State doesn't get to decide what is challenged on? It goes to the Attorney General instead. But that law sunsets after 2022?
Yes, to strip a particular Democratic Secretary of State from powers.
So they've explicitly taken the power away from the Democrat, given it because the Democrat's the Secretary of State, and given it to the Republican Attorney General, but only until
they win the power position back.
They could change it. Yeah, it's just
It's naked in its attempts.
Yeah. Anyway, and since we're at 2:10, by the way, since we're not going so well with time, I keep on teasing you guys. I'm going to get to the Electoral Count Act one of these days, probably the next one. Have you heard about the Electoral Count Act? Basically, what I keep on telling these people, these poor listeners, long-suffering listeners, is that there is a way to legally deal with all this shit, deal with all this, like the real problem, which is the states basically stealing elections that they lose by the vote and so forth. So it's called the Electoral Count Act. It's at the moment pretty loose. You can tighten it up big time. This is what Joe Manchin should be. This is what they should be pressuring Joe Manchin to pass right now, not HR1 in my view, because this is the thing that's going to stop potentially a real stolen election in 2022 or 2024. But it's going to take me 10 minutes to go through that, so I'm not going to do that.
So you're teased once more.
Sorry about that. Do you have anything else to say about this area before we move on to COVID?
Let's go on to COVID.
Okay, all right. Let's try to cram it all in. Supreme Court, I keep on pushing back. I've got some great Supreme Court stuff for you guys next week. Okay, let's go COVID. So, just very briefly. First thing is, I'm not going to go through numbers anymore on this podcast with the 20 deaths and cases because Florida don't report anymore. I don't know why they don't report anymore, but it's incredibly annoying.
Don't we know why?
Well, the thing is, I know what you're saying. And they did, by the way, when they decided to not report anymore, they were at the top of the table at the time. But the table's a pretty flat table at the moment. So it's weird that now would be the time that you want to die on that hill rather than, say, in the middle of a spike.
Perhaps it's because of the Carnival cruises, the cruise industries.
Possibly. That's a whole other area which I'd love to talk about as well. But anyway, but for that reason, it screws up all our numbers. So I'm not going to bother with those numbers anymore. I am just going to say that hospitalizations are as low as they've been for the entire pandemic, including Florida.
Thanks, vaccinations.
Yeah, so that's good. Biden's not going to hit his target. His 70% target. He's just not getting even getting close. Oh, he will get close, but he's going to fall short. He has this national month of action that he's trying to get things happening. They've got like people door knocking, and you can get vaccinated in a barber shop. I don't know why you'd want to get vaccinated in a barber shop for, but you can.
It's a local trusted relationship.
Sure, and a beauty salon. I don't trust them enough to stick a needle in me, but apparently, well, a beauty salon, I guess they stick a lot of needles in you. But anyway, they're doing that. And they've got free childcare for drop-in childcare for people. Like they've got all kinds of stuff.
I kind of like the state level initiatives better. The lottery.
The lotteries, yeah. The free joints in Washington. That's a great idea.
Free laps at Talladega.
There you go. These are good. But I will say this: there are two things. There's one thing they're doing which, well, the childcare maybe. But I was going to say that I saw a poll which told me something about what they should be doing. This is a Kaiser poll. Hispanics, 65%, black people, 54%, are more worried about missing work for getting a vaccination. These are out of the unvaccinated people. And unvaccinated people, 65 of the Hispanics are worried about missing work.
Yeah, to prove that it's not vaccine skepticism.
No.
It is surely simply circumstances that don't allow them to take the time off without losing their jobs.
And black people, 54%.
Yep.
White people, 41%. Undocumented 73%, uninsured 74%, which makes sense as well.
Valid concerns.
Yeah, so once again, the thing to do is to have as much vaccination going to workplaces as possible, or try and create some system where they can get days off or something like that. Whatever. That would make
I'm thinking
a difference.
post office, or in case of Australia, I'm thinking Bunnings.
Yes, get a snag.
Exactly. You're there you're going anyway, people.
Well, I'll tell you what. Would actually, I've mentioned this again on the podcast before, but yeah, I'm a dog with a bone. I tell you, actually, it's not funny, but it's true. I tell you what really is going to help, and it's going to happen. It might not happen by Biden's target, but it's going to happen. If they just get approved by the FDA, Moderna, Pfizer, if they get approved by the FDA, I mean really approved, not emergency approval. They've both applied. They're going to get approved, obviously. I think it's coming soon. When they're approved, it'll make all the difference, and I'll tell you why. One word with America: advertising. As soon as it's approved, they can run ad campaigns, and then we go to the towns. And I go, that's where you get through to Americans: ads. I've seen so many polls, depressing polls, where they trust ads more than they trust health officials and politicians and whatever. Like, they trust ads a lot.
Yeah, listen, they just need to get Dolly Parton out there spruiking the Moderna vaccine.
There you go. Well, right now they can't. But as soon as it's approved officially, then they can.
Yep.
So that I think is going to make the difference myself. Yeah, we'll get there. Just in terms of the two-sided, so the two-paced vaccination drive, we all know about this, but I saw interesting numbers. Alabama and Mississippi would take over a year at their current rates to get to a 70% of the adult population having one dose. Over a year to get to that. So they're not going to hit their targets. But that's, and Wyoming, it would take 10 months. There's a New York Times, I'll put a link in for you, there's a New York Times article with lots of stuff, I'll just make a note for myself. It's got every state there, which is interesting. It's a little bit, it's about
Well, and have you seen the graph that charts exactly the percentage of the vote for Biden and the vaccination rate as well?
Oh, yeah.
Seth Maskett.
Yeah, that's a good call as well. I'm going to skip a little bit here. I'm going to skip about... Okay, Sinovac is shit. let's just say that. It's really interesting because there's a bunch of countries that for through no fault of their own, just ended up with Chinese vaccines, the Sinovac in particular. Chile, Bahrain, UAE, Seychelles, Uruguay, all of them have been really good vaccinations. All of them are suffering massive spikes because Sinovac's not a good vaccine. There was a study in Serbia. 29% of the 150 participants were found to have, wait for it, 0 antibodies.
Oh, heavens.
3 months after they received the first of 2 shots of Sinovac. So 0. Now, it's better after 2, but still not nearly as good as the Moderna Pfizer ones, unfortunately. A couple of quick studies, and then we're going to get into the lab leaks. I'm going to skip past all the stuff about the billion vaccines from G7. Oh, except to just say one thing. Casey had a great pickup on the show, which I wanted just everyone to know, which is the billion vaccines from the G7, the American 500 million pledge is part of that. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. The American 500 million pledge is part of the Pfizer's pledge from way back when of 2 billion doses that they said a long time ago. These are all part of the same pledges, and they all came ages ago. And that's recycling the same pledges over.
Now we've rebranded it with the US flag.
Yeah, isn't that lovely? Isn't that lovely? But basically, what Casey made the great point. Pfizer is getting the American government to pay for their corporate social responsibility because they were pledging to get them out. And now America's going to pay for it. Thank you. Anyway, but yeah, let's go quickly study centre because some of these studies are ancient and I haven't been able to get to them for ages. Rand Paul made a big fuss about a month ago now, you might recall, about not getting the vaccine because of his natural antibodies. There was a really interesting study, like a month ago. The memory B cells from someone who has COVID and has been immunised are extremely strong. It makes them basically Superman. And it lasts for ages. Much better than someone who's either just vaccinated or just got COVID. Right. Like it's actually getting COVID plus getting the vaccine is the best protection of all. And so if you have gotten COVID, get vaccinated. Don't think to yourself, oh, I've got the antibodies already. Yes, you do have the antibodies, but they're going to wear off at some point in time. Yep. You don't know when. But if you get vaccinated and have the antibodies, it's going to last definitely the whole pandemic, and they'll be super strong even with the Delta variant. So that's an important study. Another study, 255 patients conducted at St. Barnabas Medical Center in New Jersey. This is, believe it or not, a hydroxychloroquine one. It's back. It's back. They found that people who were experiencing the worst effects of COVID and who were put on respirators and were given a combination of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, the old one, had survival rates of 2.9 times the other patients. Now, this is not a double-blind placebo trial, which is the reason why I disregard it, because I think to myself, if you've had 18 months to get a double-blinded placebo-controlled trial together, maybe it's about time you did. Because there have been double-blinded placebo-blind trials that say hydroxychloroquine does nothing. Which doesn't mean it does do nothing, it just means give us a proper trial to show that it does something, right? The reason I'm bringing this up is because Ron Johnson was banned from YouTube for a week because he mentioned that study. Maybe I'm about to get banned from YouTube as well. But not everything Ron Johnson says is automatically misinformation. Every now and then a clock stopped. Yeah, it's accurate twice a day. All I'm saying is I'm not a hydroxychloroquine pusher at all. Like I said, I'm waiting for a real trial. But I don't like the fact that we ban people from speaking about trials, real trials, that are maybe not very good trials. There's a difference between speculation and misinformation. That's what I'm saying. Misinformation is deliberately misleading people. Speculation is maybe not great during a pandemic, but in this case, I feel like a bit of humility with COVID would be nice because we've been wrong a lot already. We were wrong about masks. We were wrong about wiping down surfaces. It turns out that airborne is a much bigger issue than it being on surfaces. We were wrong about how long the vaccine would take to arrive. Fauci was saying 18 months until very, very recently. Until the vaccine came. We've been wrong a lot. And I hold no candle for Ron Johnson and his friends, but I worry when YouTube is making the calls about what medical advice we can talk about and what we can't, when people aren't saying stupid shit. When we're not saying Italian satellite shit. What are your thoughts?
I tend to think of incidents not in isolation, but as part of a pattern. Yeah. So if an individual has demonstrated that they will recklessly disregard the best medical advice we have at the time, and that's what science is, it's an iterative process, right? Being wrong could be incomplete information that we update later. It's not necessarily a malicious intent. Yeah. So I think that we're right to be quite cautious of people who've been reckless with information on this very topic in the past.
Fair enough. Okay, one more study quickly, and then we go lab leaks. New York Times had a really interesting article. Tracked health insurance records of 2 million people in America who contracted COVID over the last year. They found 1 month or more after the infection, 23% of them sought medical treatment for their new conditions. For new conditions, non-COVID conditions. It affected all ages, including kids. The health problems include pain in nerves and muscles, breathing difficulties, high cholesterol, fatigue, high blood pressure, intestinal symptoms, migraine, skin problems, heart abnormalities, sleep disorders, mental health conditions like anxiety and depression. Nearly half of patients who were hospitalised for COVID experienced subsequent medical issues that were separate from COVID. 27% of people who had mild or moderate symptoms these are all hospitalised, right? 19% of people who said they were asymptomatic were hospitalised with new conditions. Now, sure, might be a coincidence for a whole bunch of people. A lot of them may have been old, not all, but yeah, might just got sick. But just they're big numbers for hospitalisation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that could be the next issue for America's
long
healthcare
COVID.
system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and not just long COVID, but also something we don't understand, which is starting just unrelated maladies. Like it's which I guess is long COVID, but we don't know what we're dealing with. We're still fumbling around.
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting area. Okay, do you want to start with, given there's 223, do you want to start with Fauci or lab leak?
Well, let's do Fauci.
Okay.
Because this feeds into our intimidation of officials.
It certainly does. It's Fauci hunting season. You can start us off. Go for it. Talk us about Fauci hunting season. How do you feel about this?
So when I wrote a report for the Global Health Security Network on conspiracy theories, one of the implications that I said was going to outlive the pandemic was this undermining of trust in public officials, the degradation of authoritative sources of information, but also the threats of violence and intimidation affect not only current practitioners, but could actually undermine recruitment for positions like this in the future. So Fauci is the prime example, right? He has become the face, the spokesman, a trusted individual on this front. He's, of course, a presidential medal winner for his work in the medical field, and he has had emails released. And this kind of resembles a bit about what happened with the climate change scientists, where the scientific process is misunderstood by outsiders, these different codes. It's the same as the conspiracy theory about Pizzagate and Podesta emails, right? That this nefarious intent is coded into really normal, professionally relevant emails and is used to incite violence. And so you see Fauci having to hire security details not only for himself, but his family, his daughters. I think Kaiser released a report in the middle of last year about 23 states seeing very senior health officials resigning because of intimidation and threats to themselves and their families. And so I think this is a long-standing problem, but points toward a broader issue of undermining trust in science and institutions, and anyone who proffers facts really will be met with potential violence and threats to their life.
Can I just make the point here that these emails are bullshit? Like in that, like everything. I agree with everything you just said, but there are going to be people who are listening to this, maybe one or two, who are going to go, "Oh, but some of those emails, why don't you actually deal with the content rather than just tackle the man? Why don't you tackle the ball?" Okay, let's tackle the ball. I went to the American Independent. They had a summary of the emails that bothered them. Okay, so this is I've got 7 emails here. I'm not going to read them all, but I'm just going to give you a quick summary of these emails. These 7 emails. I left out none. Okay, these are all 7 emails I was so bothered by. Okay, number 1, he tells Sylvia Burwell, who's a health staffer, quote, "The typical mask you buy in a drugstore is not really effective in keeping out the virus. I do not recommend that you wear a mask, particularly since you are going to a low-risk location." He's against masks. That was in the 5th of February last year when no one believed in masks. He was wrong. He was just wrong. That's what you're talking about. When you talk about science, it
It's
changes.
a constant updating of information.
Absolutely.
That's the scientific process.
And he admits he was wrong. He said that many times. He was wrong about masks. Yes, he did mislead people a little bit when he was saying that the thing about the N95s. How he told people not to use N95s because he wanted to keep them for the healthcare workers. But he genuinely thought cloth masks didn't work. That's what he thought at the time. And he has since changed his mind. Okay, so that's email 1. Email 2. Someone wrote to him and said, "We think that there's a possibility that the virus was released from a lab in Wuhan." And he forwarded that email on to someone else with simply the phrase, "please handle." Oh, he knew! He knew it was a lab leak. No, he didn't. He received thousands of emails a day and he just didn't want to deal with this shit because he clearly didn't believe in the lab leak.
It's delegating.
Oh, yes, it's delegating. He obviously didn't believe in the lab leak, so he just, fuck, who cares? Please delegate. Go, yeah, exactly, delegate. So that's email 2. 3, he said that the vaccine will not be ready for at least 1.5 years. He was wrong.
That's just expectation setting. That's what that is.
Well, but also, at that point in time, there had never been a vaccine in history that took less than 4 years. So he was just wrong, and reasonably wrong as well, I might add. So, yeah. But number 4, Zuckerberg asked Fauci to record a Q&A for a Facebook COVID hub. So therefore, there was collusion, and there was a redacted section, which Fauci was very excited by. That was that email. What did the redacted section say? We don't know. But apparently the fact there was a redacted section shows there was corruption. Of course he wants to participate with a Q&A. Of course you'd try and get Fauci to participate in Q&A.
Yep.
He did 5 million Q&As in 2020. That's just...
I saw him with everyone from basketball players to mayors, just anyone.
That's facile, and that's also his job. Okay, number 5. We've already done half the emails. 5. Fauci coordinated a documentary made about himself. Okay, what he did was, someone asked him about a documentary. He wrote, "Please continue to work with Paddy to make this happen." Delegation again. That documentary, yes, it's about him. He's getting zero money. There is nothing, maybe go, oh, he's got a massive ego, he wants a documentary. He's promoting the profession of public health. That's his job. He's a PR guy. Of course he's going to let people make a documentary about him because it's good PR. That's his job, to be the PR guy for the public health sector. Okay, anyway, he makes no money out of it. Hey guys, sorry for those who are watching this, if you're wondering why all of a sudden we're in slightly different positions and there was a bit of a cut. For those who are listening, you didn't even know there was a cut until now. There was a cut. Turns out that I am so interesting to listen to, and people at the ABC are so riveted by American politics that they literally just stopped recording when we were halfway through this podcast. We went for another, 25 minutes, half an hour, something like that.
And it was glorious.
It was, honestly, it's like Tribute from that Jack Black song about the best song of all time. This is a tribute. This next 5 minutes is going to be a tribute to what you missed, which was the greatest podcast in the world. Sorry about that. We're just going to wrap it up. We actually kept on going on about Fauci a little bit more, and then we went on to the lab leak stuff. We can't recount it. I'm going to do lab leak next week. Sorry about that. But I am going to at least finish what we were saying about Fauci and then do a fake second goodbye.
Yes.
Okay.
Just as heartfelt as the first.
Well, halfway through these 7 emails, well, 3/4 of the way through, the 7 emails that proved that Fauci was corrupt and awful and should be driven out of the public square. Number 6, he dismissed hydroxychloroquine. Now, one of his thousands of emails was a doctor saying that he believed hydroxychloroquine was effective, and Fauci said, "Thank you for your note," and then just moved on. Now, look, I personally am waiting for a proper trial of hydroxychloroquine. Like I said before, I'm waiting for a proper trial, and I'm going to favour the side that says it doesn't do much because there have been double-blinded placebo trials that suggest it doesn't do much. I await further evidence, because I believe in science. If further evidence comes in that proves it, then sure. I don't think Ron Johnson should be censored from talking about it on YouTube. I think you should be allowed to talk about it. But the fact is that Fauci does not believe in hydroxychloroquine at this point in time. We all know that. He said that last year. So when someone says to him, "I believe in it," he wanted to move on. He gets thousands of emails a day, remember. That is not corrupt. That is not strange. That is not aberrant behaviour.
It's quite polite, actually.
It is. It actually is. And number 7, Peter Daszak, who's involved with that Eco Health Alliance, who got some of the funding from Fauci's mob, they then worked at Wuhan. They're accused of being involved with gain of function studies. I'm not going to get into that right now. That's lab leak stuff, which I have to talk about another time. But he thanked Fauci for discrediting his view, the lab leak hypothesis. You know what Fauci said in response? Nothing. There is no response in the email. Fauci just received someone saying, thanks for discrediting the lab leak hypothesis. And Fauci doesn't believe in the lab leak hypothesis. So whether you think Per Daszak is a bad guy or not, it doesn't matter. The fact is, Fauci was just saying what he believed. And then a dude thanked him. That apparently is a big problem. So there, what I just listed to you are literally the 7 emails I saw in a column about why Fauci was so done by his emails. Okay, so there's not much there.
It's a good thing they just didn't go for pizza, right? Then it would be even worse.
Just imagine. Oh my God. Okay, look, and I'll tell you the thing that annoys me the most about all this. These emails, not just these emails, but this whole environment has just ruined Fauci. When I say it's ruined, let me explain what I mean by that. I've been through this myself. When you get in an environment where you're attacked over and over again, you just feel you're at war, you get very defensive. And Fauci cannot afford to be defensive because he's meant to be the voice of science. The voice of science is meant to be dispassionate and neutral. You can't, and let me tell you what I'm talking about. We don't have the time to play this clip, certainly not now, but I will play the clip to you guys. Just look at this clip, you guys now, and I'll tell Jen what this is.
A lot of what you're seeing as attacks on me, quite frankly, are attacks on science. Because all of the things that I have spoken about consistently from the very beginning have been fundamentally based on science. Sometimes those things were inconvenient truths for people, and there was pushback against me. So if you are trying to, get at me as a public health official and a scientist, you're really attacking not only Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science.
So this is Fauci saying, when you attack Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science. Now, we all know what he means. He means that what you just said before about it's going to discourage other people from joining the scientific fraternity, public health, etc. That's not what he said. What he said is, when you attack Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science. Speaking about himself in the third person, he is mega defensive at the moment. That's a real bad look. And he just can't do his job anymore. And this is what annoys me. Anthony Fauci was a miracle worker, that he spent the best part of 12 months being attacked and keeping his head. But he's really lost it in the last couple of months, I think. And I think now he's in full defensive mode. I understand why. If I was in his position, I would be as well.
Yeah.
But he just needs to take a break. And since he's like 187, he needs to retire.
But if he retired, that would be used as proof that he's done something wrong and had to be dismissed.
Exactly, which is so infuriating because now he's going to just stick it out.
Yeah.
And Biden will definitely stick it out with him because of the partisan incentives. You never, ever give the other side a break. And he's not going to do his job as well as he should be or as well as someone else could be because he's in the trench. He's in the trenches. And it's because of shit like this that's been raining down on him for the last 14 months. And I find that extremely depressing.
Yeah, because who else would volunteer for this role, having seen the death threats, the security he's had to hire for himself and his daughters? It's a thankless task.
I sure as hell would not do it. But the thing is, as bad as Fauci's got it, it actually can get worse. It really can, because over in Belgium, they have their own Fauci. Right, is this guy called Mark Van Ranst. And this poor guy spent the last month, he's their leading virologist, he's been living in a safe house with his wife and 12-year-old son for the last month, guarded by security guards, because there is some dude, some right-wing anti-science idiot who is stalking him with quite literally a rocket launcher. The guy's a sniper. He's a trained sniper who has a machine gun and a rocket launcher. And this guy says, because they're quoting the sniper these days, the so-called political elite and now also the virologists to decide how you and I should live. They sow hatred and frustration. I cannot live with the lies. Well, it sounds like he can't let Mark Van Ranst live, rather himself. But that's for real. In Belgium, there's dudes with rocket launchers going after scientists. So
yeah,
something to look forward to.
You got to think scientists didn't sign up for this.
No, they didn't. Anyway, I've got that off my chest a second time now. this last 10 minutes of the podcast.
There was less shouting this time.
There was less. It was the best podcast ever, I tell you. This is just a tribute. We're not going to talk about the lab leak now. I'm sorry, guys. We really dealt with it well, I thought, as well. I have to say.
We can't replicate that.
No, we
It was
can't.
perfection.
We can't. I'll bring it next time. I've got a whole bunch of theories on that, as you would expect. How can people reach you?
Yes. If you would like more insights from Jen, feel free to follow me on Twitter. My handle is @Dr. _Jen Hunt, JenHunt. The
most important bit that we can't show you now because it got not recorded by the ABC is when Dr. Jen said she actually enjoyed herself and she's going to be back. So I'm holding you to that.
That's hearsay.
Even though there is no film of it whatsoever. You're not sneaking away that easy. Thanks a lot, folks. I will be back next week with the lab leak and Supreme Court and all the things I haven't got to. See you guys later.
Love to read and learn, travel and explore. You're a fearless, braveheart patriot who's opened doors. You are courage, you're our voice. Jovan, we thank you for what you're fighting for. You're our warrior. You are brave like a lion. You're David fighting Goliath. Couldn't ask for more. You're our warrior. Think of what you've done for you, for me, for our country. You'll go down in history as our